Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of Grassroots Racing Show.
Welcome to the Grassroots Racing Show. I'm Doug Thompson with my brother co-host Roger Thompson. Roger, this week we're taking a look at the second half of the Hutchinson Nationals, 56th running of the Hutchinson Nationals, and that's certainly been, over the years, that's been the Daytona 500, the Indianapolis 500 of local track racing throughout Kansas. It's been a very prestigious race.
A highlight of the year for these racers, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And matter of fact, when we talk about the Hutch Nationals, the night at the track race from Hutchinson Raceway, or Speedway I guess it is, will be following. It'll be the night at the track event, and Mike Kraft and the film crew have been there shooting, and we've got excellent coverage. The sprint car race you're going to be watching is one of the best races you'll see, and it doesn't matter which network you're watching or where the camera crew's at. This is excellent racing coming up.
And the photography work by Mike Kraft and some of the workmanship he's put into this is incredible. I would not have recognized that as being the Hutchinson afternoon racetrack that we normally ran in.
No, I wouldn't either. They obviously had some rain before. This is one of the trophies. This will show you the size of it. It'll be higher than what the camera can even pick up for us here. It's probably 5 foot or more tall. This is the 32nd Nationals, but it's pretty representative of the trophies that Speedway Inc. gives out. They do an excellent job, and I'll guarantee you this is one of the races that anybody who races locally wants to win. When you take a look at the list of winners over the years in the Hutchinson Nationals, it's a who's who of racers and people who have been successful with racing across the state. But there's also, throughout that field, there's a lot of really good racers that never got the chance to win the Nationals, and it's kind of one of those situations, as is always the case. It's the right place, right time, everything fits together, and it just works right. And on that particular day, it can be your day, and you can go 9, 10 more times, and you can try as hard as you want, but you just don't win it. And it's like the racers find out in NASCAR when you go to Daytona. There's only one winner, and sometimes you can lead for most of the day, but it's that checkered flag right at the end that makes the determination and puts a name onto the plaques down at the museum in Daytona that signifies the winner. And that's the same with this. There's, over the years, there's the list of winners, and you just have the good fortune to be in that. I've been fortunate enough to win the Nationals on 2 occasions, and as Richard Petty would say, when they said, well, you've won 200 races, Richard, and he said, I guarantee you I've lost a lot more than that. And he has. And the same's true. You may win 1 or 2 of these, but you lose a lot more of them.
And you can be just like Doug. If you don't like the size of the trophy, you can do what he did. This original trophy stopped right here. He just added about 5 feet to the bottom of it, and it makes a nice display here for the museum.
Well, it does, you know, and if you're at home and you have some of these, this wood isn't all that expensive. And you can make the trophies look pretty good until you run across people who were there with you and remember it, like my brother was here. So now that's been exposed, so I'll put that away after a bit.
They're all that size, a beautiful trophy, so that was just a joke, people. That was just a joke.
And I want to remind you that you can pick up the races that you're going to be seeing right after this show at the night at the track, and you can pick up the Grassroots Racing Show by going to TV OK out of Oklahoma, out of Enid, Oklahoma. And in the races that you're watching last week and this week, there's a lot of really good racers from the Oklahoma area who had success at the Hutch Nationals. So that's available. You can also pick up this show on Eagle Cable System, which is across Kansas. Excellent coverage. They've been fantastic to work with, and you can pick it up from our own website, which is grassrootsracing.org. And you can go there and watch any of the shows and pick up the old shows, go into the archive system. You can pick up the interviews, and we even have on there the commercials over the years that Roger and I have done, and some of those have become rather popular in the YouTube setting, I guess. Our Arts and Mary's commercial seems to be one that we hear about all the time, and it
never spoke a word. We never spoke a word, and have had more hits and more comments about that Arts and Mary's commercial. And every time I see it, I have to think, where did the idea come for that? It came from we were walking from here to there in order to come up with that idea and did that commercial. It was a lot of fun and a very effective commercial.
And it was good because we got to eat the Arts and Mary's, and they're an excellent potato chip.
And they're still with us.
Yeah, they are still a sponsor. Those 2 brothers are gluttons for punishment and really good guys. They work hard, and they really work to promote the Arch and Mary's products. Roger, one of the races we're going to be watching when we get to the night at the track is going to be the sprint car race. And I know you and I were reviewing that before this show started. That's about as good of a sprint car race as I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was a very good race. And as I was looking at that, it reminded me of a few things. And as you watch this race, you'll see that one of the guys, everybody was running down on the hard pack of the track because it looked like typical Hutchison. You had two lanes that's pretty much paved, and then the outside looked like it was crumbly. And if you jumped out in those crumblies, you were going to be going to the wall and lose a sprint car. But one of the guys who was running in the back, and we'll talk about that later, decided to jump out there and try it, and it worked. And of course, when that happens, you've got to be aware that if you're the guy that does it and it works, there's going to be 20 other fellas right behind you in the same place giving it the same try. But there's a very good display of what happens when you do that in this particular clip.
Yeah, and that is tough to pass down at Hutch because normally up on the high side of the track, the crumblies, the loose dust and dirt gets thrown up there, and if you get into that, that's just like a magnet right to the wall. You just have no control over the car, and you would go up and hit the wall. But you'll see this time that's not the way it turned out, and that reminds me of the one with the down at the Kansas State Fair, that you did that same move and went from the back and went up and won that feature.
Yeah, that was in 1990.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. You're watching Grassroots Racing Show.
Hi, I'm Pat Neal. Thanks for tuning in to watch this edition of Grassroots Racing.
Welcome back to the Grassroots Racing Show. I'm Doug Thompson with my brother co-host Roger Thompson. Roger, in just a little bit we're going to take a look at that footage from the 56th Nationals. It's going to be the sprint car race. We bragged about it quite a bit, but I'll set the field just a little bit. Mark Robe is sitting on that inside pole, and Jeremy Petty's on the outside front row. Normally you would figure that that's where the winners...
Jeremy
not Petty, Campbell.
Yeah.
Jeremy Petty's a young fella that's Jack's grandson, and he's running in the ARCA series and going to do some nationwide. Matter of fact, he's running the Grassroots Racing Modified right now, trying to get that dialed in for us. That's Jeremy Petty. This is Jeremy Campbell. And you remember his wife, Katie, of course, has been here, and really good people. I've met him. He's just a nice young man. And he's on the front row, but also in that field you've got Kevin Swindell. And this show leads off, when we start on the night at the track, leads off with somebody you've raced against lots of times, Mike Peters.
Yeah, raced with Mike for many years. And when I first met Mike, he was running the six-cylinder, I don't remember what they called them, six-cylinder cars at Wichita. We were running the Shipper's V8 in the late 60s and 70s. This had to be in the 70s, because Mike's not that old, but yeah, he was running the six-cylinder class down there. Nice fella.
Yeah,
I always liked him. Pretty understated fella. He never embellishes anything. He just gets the job done.
Races everywhere.
Oh,
races
yeah.
all kinds of cars.
You'll find him at Knoxville on occasion, and he gets around.
Yeah, and Mike, by his own admission, is getting a little bit of age to him, and probably not as much as Mike Kraft gave to him when he did the interview with him. Mike Kraft does the interview because he's down shooting the footage for this and for us. But Mike's telling him that, well, getting to be our age isn't like this, and Mike Peters is looking at Mike Kraft, and I don't think he thinks he's quite that age, because Mike is
no
still
one's
a good
that
age.
age.
No, nobody's that age. Which reminds me,
I'd like to have that energy level he's got.
Yeah, he does, and he's always a good job with the racing. Well, what you're going to see when we start this feature race here is you're going to see a fella come from deep in the pack, and I think he probably started back there about, I think 14th or somewhere along in there, and it was Kevin Swindell. And he did just what we were talking about before. That track had taken on some water. They had some rain, I think, the night before. And that top groove was actually there, but wasn't being used much for the reasons we've already discussed. If you get up there in the marbles, you're generally going right into the wall, and you've got a lot of damage because the wall will almost always win. But Kevin Swindell takes that car to the high side of the track, and he passes and moves up to the second place within 3/4 of a lap. He's right up there at second place. You almost never see that happen.
Not as competitive as this class is. That's true.
Yeah, and it's also just like what you said, because as soon as you go by those cars and they see that your car's sticking up there, those start changing the line, and so now you get a disadvantage if you're like Mike Robe and you're starting on the front row and you get that lead. you're pretty used to the idea that you're going to run that low to middle line on that Hutch track, because that's the safest place. You're up front, it's hard to pass, and he doesn't know what's going on behind him. But here comes Kevin Swindell, who's just eating the field alive, and the other cars, several in the field who can move up, feel like their car will work up there, move up to that high side, and now they're picking up momentum. And of course, you're kind of as the old story goes, you're just a sitting duck up there at the front, because you don't know.
Sure.
You don't have any way of knowing. There's no mirrors, and you can't tell from the sound until all of a sudden you see Kevin Swindell come flying by.
Yeah, and of course that Mark's in the position where he thinks he's taking a chance if he moves out to the very edge of the packed stuff to try and get up in that little bit of cushion, not realizing there's an entire lane of tacky racetrack up there. The other thing is, if you're running in that black stuff, you're heating up your right rear, and the guy running up there in that cushy stuff is a nice soft tire, and it's not getting glazed, and he's going to get the traction and go.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. The downside to all that is, in no time, you're running into lap traffic, and now your lane is now used up, and it forces Swindell, in this case, or whoever's running up there, forces him to come out of that comfortable fast groove and try to get down and weave in and out of this traffic. And the other thing I said, there's no poor drivers in this field, and so they're all pushing as hard as they can in the good lane, and it takes away a lot of the options, and all of a sudden at the end of the race everything gets pretty close.
Yeah, you start putting the white flag with it, and that excitement, the adrenaline begins to go. You've been running the high side picking up cars, and normally at that track what you would get, you might get the leader after a 20-lap race, and the leader may be at the checkered flag, and last place may be the middle of the back straightaway after 20 laps, because you don't make up a lot of ground, and we both know it from dry slick tracks. You could take that guy that's running in 19th or 20th and put him to the front and put the field behind, and all of a sudden he'll hold that spot. Yeah. He'll hold that spot up there, because it's position and things dry out. The tracks are different than what it was at the start, or maybe even when you qualified, and the competition is just simply that good.
What I want to say about this race, it was one of the best sprint car races I've seen, but the other thing I want to emphasize is that everybody in that race was a winner, because there's no wrecks. There's minor fender bender, but I mean, for sprint cars, no wrecks. And it was a good, safe race, and everyone loaded up their equipment. And to me, that's awfully important in this day and any time. That's awfully important.
And you're right. And all the footage that we watched through the 56 Nationals, I didn't see that those bad wrecks that were happening. There were spin outs, and they would collect multiple cars. But I didn't see that silly driving, that intentional pounding and then causing accidents that would happen. And it appears to me that the racers are very conscious of the fact that they've got a lot of money in these cars, and it's a tight economy, and you cannot afford to be tearing up your equipment, or you're going to be setting up in the stands or not even coming to the track.
And that track, because of its speed and because of its configuration and the way the conditions are, forces you to be a safer, better driver.
Yeah, it does. When we come back for the final segment on the Grassroots Racing Show, we're going to visit with the voice of 81 Speedway, Warren Hardy. You'll want to stay tuned.
This is Scotty Anderson, and you're watching my favorite show, Grassroots Racing.
Welcome back to the Grassroots Racing Show. I'm Doug Thompson, along with my special guest, Warren Hardy from 81 Speedway, also Speedway Inc. And Warren, we've been watching the Grassroots Racing Show and Night at the Track Racing from the 56th Hutchison Nationals. And man, just to say the 56th Hutchison Nationals really seems odd, because I cannot believe it's been that many years.
Well, Doug, first off, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy being on the show and getting a chance to visit with you and Roger and all your audience and all. Yeah, you think 56 years, an event in Hutchinson, Kansas, of the magnitude that this is. You can go into dirt track racing, Doug, and look up annual events, and you're not going to find many 56. If you find 5 of them, I would be surprised. But one of them's right here, and what a tradition it is.
Well, it is, and it's the Hutchison Nationals, of course, started in 1958. Originally, Jack Merrick started the program at, I don't even know if he started the program, but the first race was held at Taft Stadium in Oklahoma, and I know Jack was there because then he took the event from Taft Stadium and moved it to Hutchinson, and Jack ran it as the promoter until '76, and then C. Ray Hall, your boss and your team, took over for Speedway Inc. in 1977, and you guys have had it since, and you've really done a fantastic job with it.
Well, thank you, Doug, and I will certainly pass that on to C. Ray Hall and the entire staff, because, you know, if you get behind the scenes, much like you've been able to, or some of the racers that have been promoters as well, there's a lot more than just posting the start time, some prize money, turning the lights on, and dropping a green flag. It takes a whole lot of cooperation from a whole lot of people, especially when you go to a facility the size of the Kansas State Fairgrounds. I mean, you know, not many facilities can seat 10,500 people for an auto racing event. That one does. It has the area where you can park cars, but unfortunately, when you have the area, you've got guys spread out, and they get away from you, and the communication has got to be there. You got to have the staff to get the communication to them, and we've been very fortunate in that. And then we've also been very fortunate with all the teams knowing our procedures and being ready when we say ready, set, go.
It was as good of racing as I think I've seen anywhere, and Roger and I were talking before you came on, Warren. Roger's already left and went to do some other things, but we were talking about how clean the racing was, and of course there's always some spin-outs. You can't have competition without it, but the racing was very clean, and it sure looked like to me that the racers were extremely respectful of each other's equipment, and it looked like they were having a good time.
Well, you know, Doug, Keith Schroeder, he's in charge of the grounds over there at the Kansas State Fairgrounds, has been for a number of years now, and they put that new surface on over there, and Keith is a big, avid race fan. Denny Steckline, the general manager, he appreciates what auto racing does at the Kansas State Fairgrounds, and he gives Keith a little bit more leeway in that manner when we come over there to do the Hutchinson Grand Nationals. And, you know, you're exactly right. From the surface to the way that Keith Schroeder and his staff attend that racetrack, they start pouring water on that thing about 2.5 weeks before the event actually happens. And then the days of the races, they're out there watering at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they don't stop until we pull them off and say, guys, we've got to go racing here. And when you give the drivers and the teams that are competing now in this time and era that kind of surface and that kind of racing facility, it allows them to be the professionals that they are. And you're right. You're still going to see some spin-outs. You're still going to have some incidents where somebody may have gone in over their head or something. But, hey, let's face it again. That's a 1/2-mile racetrack, and how many of these stock car guys, especially, that run locally every Saturday night at a speedway that come to that event, get to run on a racetrack? I mean, some of these guys are going 40, 50 miles faster than they've ever gone in a race car when they go into turn number 1 and 3, and I think they do a heck of a job with it. Then you get your sprint cars and the modifieds, and those guys that are a little bit more professional and run a whole lot more races and definitely run on other racetracks. You know, those guys, you give them a racetrack, they'll put on a show, Doug, and I think we saw that this year.
Oh, I think you did. You had some of the greatest racing that I've seen, and the Night at the Track, which follows our Grassroots Racing show, covers all of the races from the 56th Nationals, all of the feature races, I should say. And I remember Roger and I were talking about it earlier, and I said I really enjoyed that Thumper race because right at the start of it, Brad Costello in the R2 car takes off, and it looks like he's going to be in pretty good shape. And then, like sometimes happens, lo and behold, you get a left rear tire that's flat. You hate to give up the spot. You can't keep going. What in the world do you do? But it sure opened the door for Adam Popp to get in there, and he had a really good run.
Boy, Adam Popp out of Haven, Kansas. This guy, you know, Doug, this guy's just a big old farm boy that just loves doing what he's doing. And unbelievably, he drives a race car pretty darn good, too.
Yeah, he does.
He was excited as could be because here's another kid that grew up around this event, you know. Ever since he's been able to go to the races over there at the Kansas State Fairgrounds, even before he had a race car, why he was familiar with it. And that's one of the legendary things that makes this event what it is. You know, in time, back when Roger and you were racing, and you go back to the Will Forrest and the Harold Leaps and those guys, there wasn't a racetrack that didn't shut down for the Hutchinson Grand National.
You're right.
Because they all came there. Now then, other racetracks, and understandably so, because there's only so many Saturday nights or Friday nights in a season that promoters have to operate and make money. So not everybody shuts down for this event anymore. But, you know, it's just one of those things that makes this event what it is. And when Adam Popp got out of there, he did more damage to the roof of his car, Doug, than he has to the rest of the race car the entire season running over here on 81 Speedway.
Yeah, he was excited. And the same's true in your street stock race. Your winner in your street stock race, you know, that was a fun race to watch because it looked like it was just going to be a breakaway, and our camera guys begin to focus on second and throughout the pack because it was really good racing throughout the pack. And then darned if we get about 5 laps to go, and I see the flagman's hand come out, 5 to go, and about the time that signal comes out, here that smoke starts coming out of the car.
Unbelievable. You know, and Doug, you've raced that event many times. You know that so many scenarios have to play through for you to win a championship, not just on a regular Saturday night, but when you go to an event with the magnitude of the Hutchinson Nationals or Knoxville or wherever it is. If all the stars don't line up, you can have the greatest equipment, the greatest driver, the most money spent, and something can happen that you know, you couldn't prepare for, and all of a sudden you're on the outside looking in, and Ray Nolf was right there.
Yeah.
And you know, that guy, that was his 4th Hutchinson National Championship. Kind of neat to see him dedicate that race to his brother Gary Nolf, who I believe is still here in a hospital in Wichita.
Yeah, he said he was in intensive care for 20-some days now, and that was an emotional one for him. And sometimes when you go out and you put that extra effort because you really want to win it for somebody, and he did for his brother, and congratulations to him. You had a really good race in your sports mod with Caleb Edwards.
How about Caleb Edwards of South Coffeyville, Oklahoma? I mean, you know, arguably right now, Doug, I would say the sport mod division, and I don't care if it's in Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, wherever you're at, is probably one of the most competitive divisions out there just because of the way they've got the rules set up and all of those things. But Caleb Edwards, you know, guy is the first champion of the Hutchinson Nationals for him, or first championship for him. Just did a fantastic job, and he got out of that car and he said, you know, the last 2 laps, I didn't know I could hold my breath that long because I just knew something was going to happen.
Yeah.
I watched some of those other races, and he was just about as excited as anybody could be.
And your modified racing, it just does not get any better than that.
Oh, golly sakes. I've touted, and I know that people would argue with me about USMTS and some other traveling modified shows, but I will take NCRA modified guys and go and race against anybody if the rules are all the same. Tanner Mullins, you know, the 3rd generation driver. That's 3 Mullins now: Pinky, Buddy, his dad, and now Tanner, that have won that event. And Tanner Mullins, I mean, he did it on the top, he did it on the bottom, and then just showed some muscle and flat left the boys.
He did, and his old car was working great, and boy, he deserved it. But we get to that last race of the night, the sprint car race. Now, let me tip you off with this one, Warren. The fans have not seen that race because Night at the Track, with the finals of the 56th Nationals, which includes that sprint car race, will be coming up on right after this segment here. So I don't want you to give away that winner.
I don't want to give it away. I won't give it away. I'm just going to say to your audience, Doug, you got to watch this. A perfect example. Jay Schrock, who used to compete in the days of the super modifieds for Pat Haskard out of Hutchinson, Haskard Clearance, walked up to me after that race was over with, came clear out of the grandstands into the infield where we do the announcing from, and he said, Hardy, that was probably the best race I've ever seen on this racetrack.
I agree with him. I thought that was the best. Well, other than a couple of my own national wins, I like that one best. And listen, it was way better than any nationals I've raced in. That was as good as it gets, Warren. And you guys at Speedway Inc. ought to be absolutely delighted. I can't believe we've already used up our whole segment time, because I could talk to you for a whole show, Warren, and one of these times we'll do so. But it's good talking to you. Thanks for being a part of Speedway Inc., for being the voice of the nationals, and you do a fantastic job. Tell C-Ray I just love the article in the Performance Racing magazine, his interview there, and it's a class act. We're looking forward to the 57th, and if I can get my old body to make it happen, I'm going to come down and run with you, Warren.
Gosh, Doug, that'd be fantastic, and I just appreciate you having us on and talking racing, and always look forward to it, Doug.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Warren. You take care.
You too, Doug. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. This is Warren Hardy from 81 Speedway, Speedway Inc., voice of the nationals. Fantastic individual and fantastic organization he's involved with. Hope you enjoy the night at the track races, and watch that sprint car race. You'll love it.